Hello and welcome to the Nothing is Wrong with You book podcast. We're thrilled to have you here with us today. As always, we start the podcast with what we're currently reading. I'm going to pass it on to Colleen today. What are you reading right now?
First, I want to say, go Eagles. This is my AJ Brown book club sweatshirt. So the two of these guys are out west, but I am an hour outside of Philadelphia, and reading is taking over because AJ Brown read on the sidelines. So it's very exciting. I love my like reading rainbow AJ Brown book club. And hopefully when you're listening to this, the Eagles have won. So anyway, I had to share my my book club sweatshirt. It's getting lots of love here on the East Coast. I always cheat because I always like finish books right before. So I have my memoir. I always have like a memoir, a fiction, and then kind of like a just comfort book. So my comfort book is The Serviceberry. I did just finish that. I feel like this book is having a moment. So if you haven't read it, please check it out. I recently also finished Whiskey Tender by Deborah Jackson Taffa. I think we talked a little bit about this because it was on a lot of end of the year book lists. I thought it was pretty good. And then I am in the middle of My Friends by Hisham Matar. I would call this a sitting up book. I always talk to my students about there's sitting up books and there's lying down books. Like that's a sitting up book. Like you need to be sitting up to read that. So it's slow going, but I'm really glad I'm reading it. So those are my three on the desk. What about you, Athena?
Okay, let's see. All right. Okay, so I'm reading Julia Baird. Will you tell me too if I've like talked about this many times?
But is this the bear? Is that the woman who wrote the
no, this is Bright Shining, How Grace Changes Everything. Okay, I heard about this on like a best of the year podcast. I'm trying to remember, and it was all these Australian book editors talking about books they loved. I don't know. I just look for best of the year book podcasts. I want to hear what people are reading, right? And it's this beautiful book about the word grace in not a religious sense, but more in just what we think of that word. And I am loving it. And she talks about it's kind of about cancel culture and she prefaces with some people are just monsters. So yes, of course we have to have that. But what if a mistake is a turning point to change instead of the cancellation of growth and learning, and really beautiful. And then all the examples, she goes through about what she thinks grace is. I'm loving that. That's really, really beautiful. An Australian editor.
Sounds like an Australian Anne Lamott.
Yes, it is. I love that.
Because Anne Lamott just wrote in her book about that, like being canceled and learning from it and things like that. So
yeah, I love it. I'm loving that. What else am I reading here?
Sounds good.
I finally read The Vegetarian by Han.
Okay, I need to just say out loud that then Kang won the Nobel after I said she shouldn't be on that list. So I feel really guilty about that. So I'm really glad you've opened the door for me because I do want to read that. Go ahead and talk about this. But thank you for bringing her up.
But I also think, we don't have to like all the books, even if they're award winners.
Maybe I should have. Maybe The Vegetarian does. I don't know. Okay, so Athena, you're reading her new book. Tell us about this.
Gave me bad dreams, so it's fine. This one is I'm only a little bit in them. I'm not finished with this one, but I love it. Oh, We Do Not Part. So, and this is really beautiful. But I'll let you know as I keep going. What else am I reading? I have a lot going on here. Oh, I have. Let me see. Oh my gosh, there's a lot going on right now. This is the last two I'll do. How to Winter. I'm enjoying this right now. I like books about, if it's by Kari Leibowitz. It's harness your mindset to thrive on cold, dark, or difficult days. You can see the thread of what I'm reading right now. I'm like, help me get through it. Help. So,
books are solace, right? Books are solace. That's why we read.
And then the last one I'll mention is Jenna Rose Nethercott. She wrote Thistlefoot, but this is 50 Beasts to Break Your Heart, these short stories. And they're just amazing, like beautiful, I don't know, folklore, fantasy. They're right. It's hard to describe. They're just amazing. Read this. Tell me what you think. I'm loving it. I think these are incredible. So those are my books. Sorry it took so long. But
It
there's a
did
lot
take
going
long, and I always leave. I love how different like your reading is to mine because I always leave and immediately order something after we record.
Oh,
Exactly. I was
So
taking notes. I'm like, oh
I
yeah,
know
that's
I'm
good.
gonna need those notes because that Grace book sounds really like good company right now. So,
yeah.
and
I love
I
it.
heard that woman. I heard the Wintering book. I heard an interview with her on NPR, and I
Oh,
just love
good.
that concept. I love that concept having a moment. The
Mhm.
Yeah.
Catherine Mays. Oh, we all met and talked about Catherine Mays
Yeah.
Wintering during COVID, didn't we?
That was our first like book club together
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Oh,
with
that's nice.
Chelsea.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Wintering is a good book too. We can give that one a shout out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although I'd love to know how she had health care, but we've talked about that too.
We did talk
Rebecca,
about that.
what you reading? What
Yeah,
you
what are
reading
you
at
reading?
3 times the speed while you speed walk?
So I just finished Knife on recommendation from Colleen. One of our last podcasts of I think it was the 2024 reads. So that was actually my first Rushdie book. I'm friends with Colleen, and that was my first one. I haven't read
Okay.
any of this, but it's just not it hasn't been my area. So anyway, it was good. It was a good memoir. In some ways, maybe a good introduction to him too. And yeah,
You might have had enough. I
yeah.
mean,
Oh
I
yeah.
love
I'm like,
Salman
that was
Rushdie's
good.
work,
That was good.
but like that's
Too many. There's so many books in the world.
yeah.
Another book that I'm currently reading that I've been reading for a little while is Scotland: The Story of a Nation by Magnus Magnusson.
Oh, wow.
So, um,
Ooh.
with my little
Sounds like
Bellinghamster
my worst
bookmark.
nightmare. Oh, I have my Bellinghamster
Um,
downstairs.
So when I travel, we were just recently in Scotland last year. And when I travel, I like to often read books about where I am, right? And
Yeah.
I had lived in Scotland before, and so I just thought, oh, this would be really good. Someone posted this book, like with some coffee or something on their Instagram, and I was like, oh, a book on Scotland. I'm gonna get it and take it with me to Scotland. And then it's like 700 pages long, and I was like, oh no, I have tiny carry on. There's no way I'm taking this thing with me. And so this is one of those that's like I'm reading slowly. And when I have moments, so next podcast I might be like, and I'm still reading Scotland.
Okay.
But yeah, it's good. And I've had a couple other audiobooks, but none that really stood out that I think I need to even mention here. So
Awesome.
all right.
Always reading. It's our constant, a good reminder, right? It's our constant company. It's the thing that makes us feel better. It's a thing that creates community. So all of these things in this moment that you might need, maybe a book or a book club is a good idea.
Absolutely. Like I think, we so often the three of us even pick up books because of each other, right? Like we were just writing down like some of the ones that Athena put on. I listened to Knife because you recommended it. So it's interesting that just even having conversations like this with friends can help you see other books or things that you can pick up. So speaking of that, as we go into the podcast, we talk about books that either are getting recognition or out there in the world with awards, maybe even that we just kind of didn't resonate with. And so the first one we're going to talk about today, I'm going to actually start again with Athena. This is the Athena starting podcast. Because when we talked about what we were reading last year and what was really resonating with us, you mentioned like all the stuff on the Booker, which I still haven't had the Stoneyard devotional. Is it devotional yet? I need to get that from you.
It's in the car. I haven't moved it from the car so that I get it to you.
Okay, perfect. And one of the books on there was Creation Lake, and who was that by? Rachel
Kushner.
Yeah. And so because you were reading it, I remember you posting, like showing me the picture of the cover when you were reading it. I put all the bookers on my list, when the library had them in audio book, if they were available. So when I was listening to Creation Lake, I'm like, I wonder what Athena thought of this book. And so this is for us to talk about Creation Lake. So what were your thoughts when you were reading Creation Lake?
Yeah. Well, those things about it is we have two good friends that well, they're a family of three that live in England, and I was talking to them about the Booker nominees. This we had a Zoom a couple weekends ago, And I was saying I don't know what's going on with that panel, but like almost everything on there I loved so much. Like, and so I think that for me is the difference here is like, I mean, I won't go through all the titles again like I have in the past, but like Orbital, you know how I feel. Like, I mean, again, like there's so many on there that I just wanted to hug when I was done reading it because it was so beautiful. Like, and just like, I don't know, just kind of amazing the quality of writing and just how it made me feel when I finished. And then I got to creation, like, poor, I feel bad. If you're listening, I don't think you're a horrible writer. I just don't understand.
They were nominated for a Booker. I mean, okay, we don't have to worry about.
Yeah, we're never going to punch down on this podcast.
you.
I want to be really clear about that. Like, this
Yes.
is not meant to be negative. It is just
No.
meant to be a conversation to make people
Yes.
feel better. So you are okay to say that.
Thank you.
Athena.
Yes, thank you. I like that. I needed that little note because I actually, so I'm reading it, and it wasn't the thing for me is it wasn't like, oh my God, this is like bad, this is horrible. I didn't understand it in comparison to the others, I guess.
Mm.
Like I read it and I was like, it was fine. Like I thought it was interesting. I actually liked when she talked about history and the early like humans and like that kind of thing. Like I thought that was kind of interesting that those comparisons and all of that. But I got to the end of it and I was just like, I felt like I had said in previous podcasts, maybe she's too smart for me because I just don't get the thing that's like whoa about it. Like I didn't feel that. Or if there's something super clever that I missed, like I just got done reading and I was like, that was fine. But next to the others, I just didn't feel it the same. So, but when I kept reading through reviews, I was like, gosh, what am I missing here? So anyway, that I don't know if that describes it well, but that.
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, I think that was when I listened to it, that was some of my thinking as well, right? Like I feel like there was some really great history there. I mean, even stuff like Captain Cook was thrown in there. There was, I don't know if anyone saw that Colleen was picking up her Bigfoot mug that she has. Like there's even a section where they talk about Bigfoot in the beginning. And I'm like, ooh, Bigfoot, where are we going with all of this? All the Neanderthal stuff at the beginning. And so when I finished it, like it was really just like, okay, I was listening to it and I was in the middle of a trail. Like I'm like walking and I was just like, okay, this didn't really, it felt like the history stuff was forced at sometimes to be put in there that I felt like, how is this connecting to this story? It was all very interesting. I think in some way it was like, I'm going to throw all this stuff in here and I'm going to try to make it all connected because somehow history is all connected, which it is. But I think, so I texted to myself about what was kind of like going on there. And I think, so I have my note here and I do not know how comprehensive this is even going to make sense because I was walking. Towards the end of the book, there's a line that Bruno says around, you can know things without knowing anything. And I felt like that was the book as a whole, right? Like you can know things without knowing anything. And that felt like why all the history stuff was just like random stuff that you're like, why are we learning about this now? But I think that the essence of the book is kind of like glimpsing into something, but you don't quite know what it is. And there's some interesting insights, but it was really hard to care about the characters. And we've talked about this before, even with Kingsolver, right? When we talked about Kingsolver's later books, that it was really hard for us to connect the character. It didn't feel character driven, or it didn't feel like you could really care about them. And so I know we'll get to your observation of Crater Lake in a second, Colleen, but the main character is a spy. And so half the time you're like, is she lying? Is this who she is? Like, who are you? Like, what do we know about you? That unreliable narrator in some way, right? Like, so if we're not seeing the character for who they are, we're seeing the spy version, but sometimes glimpses. so when I was thinking about it, I'm like, is that also where I was struggling? Because I felt like I couldn't connect to the character. And then there was these random history things. Again, like you can know everything without knowing anything, right? Like it just really felt that line. And I probably didn't I tried to like Google the exact line because I don't have the book. I was listening to it, but it was like that line just for me captured in some way what was good about the book, but then also why it was really difficult for me to like. I basically I'm not going to go and recommend this to a whole bunch of people. Like it was I I read like a review that talked about, oh, I wrote it down. Oh yeah, this review I can't remember where it was, but they talked about trudging through the book, and I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
that's what this felt like, trudging through the book.
Was that a positive review?
It was an honest review. I wouldn't say it was positive. I mean, I think very similar to what I just said. There's positive elements of it. But yeah, no. I mean, I think if the review starts with, I had to trudge through this book, you know where that's going. So,
Yep.
so then Colleen, because the two of us had read it, kind of were like, meh. Then you picked it up.
So, what something you said though, Rebecca, is really striking me about the inscrutability. That seems to be like a thing with books right now, that we are valuing inscrutability, and maybe that's something about me as a writer, but I do not value inscrutability. Like maybe I'm looking to books for something different. Again, we're not afraid of books, but so I first got it from the library, so that means I'm not going to try as hard, so I should be that clear. And I also was coming off Fee by Alexandra Fuller and Orbital. So we should also talk about like how we read books. Again, sometimes it's not the book. So I started reading it and I was like, I'm not going to curse so we don't get the explicit thing on here. But why am I reading 10 pages about Neanderthals? Like, to come off of the clarity of prose of Fee and Orbital, which I just want to talk about both of them forever, and the Serviceberry. I'd read those three, and then I tried to read Creation Lake. I just stopped because I knew both of you were lukewarm on it, and part of what we're trying to do here is let you feel permission as people who are listening or watching to just be like, I know everybody else. And this was in January when there were so many articles about how that was like the best book. Like if you look at the Atlantic's best books, they were all like the editor's picks. They were all like books we've talked about or are going to talk about. And I was like, okay, maybe we're onto something. Yeah. So I abandoned. We should keep like an abandoned list, but I abandoned. I got through that part and I was like, oh, it takes place in France, I think, right? I was like, oh, I like things that are in France. So then we were starting to meet her and then I was just like, I'm out. There's so many other things I want to read. So I will never know, but based on what the two of you are saying, this kind of inscrutability it doesn't speak to me as a reader. So maybe there's something about that. There's value to that in the world we live in, right? The world is inscrutable, but also I read to maybe feel a little more grounded. So I don't know why it's called it. I don't really know much more about it because 2 out of 3, right? I was like, nope. If 2 people I trust didn't like it, I stopped. So I abandoned.
Yeah.
Too much Neanderthal talk. I was like, I don't know what we're doing here. I have no, like I went and read the front flap. Like, what is this book even about? Exactly. Like I remember when we talked about the bee sting. Yeah. And maybe not on the podcast, but like, okay, what really happened at the end? And I won't talk specifically about that, but you made a comment, or did I find it? Like he said at one point, the first line of the book should relate to the last line of the book.
Yeah, I found that. Yeah.
You found that. Yes. Because we were talking about what really happens at the end of the bee sting. And I was thinking about that. I'm like, if this is setting up anything having to do with the end, I don't really want to come along for this 300-page ride.
I mean, I think I think that probably would have been when I abandoned it. I would have if I had. But I was like that review and I trudged through it, right? Like, because I remember when I was listening to it, I'm like, what is happening? Why are we talking about Neanderthal?
Yeah.
So yeah, interesting. So I think normally in the podcast we only kind of talk about one book, but we've been talking right now about abandoning a book. And so we have another book that recently that is also on all the lists and everyone's talking about. And I picked it up because Colleen picked it up. So and then and then when I was like, and then Athena's like, oh no, I abandoned that. So let's start with you, Colleen. You picked up the book and shared it, and then I picked it up. So what happened there?
I'm remiss. I don't have a copy of it, and here's why. So I really wanted to read Martyr because that was coming up on every list as well. And it just sounds really connected to like things I'm interested in academically. And so I bought it, but didn't realize that I bought it in large print format because I can't see, but also I'm not that ill-sighted. So I sent it back, but didn't tell anybody on the podcast that I had sent it back and not read it. So so I fully intend, I am on the waiting list at the library for it. But so I sent it back and hadn't read it and have been waiting for the library to get it. But in the meantime, I seem to have influenced the other two friends on this podcast. So they're going to talk about having actually read it. Even though I was the one like, I really want to read this. That happened to me with I can talk about a book that this did happen to me with, Homeland Elegy. It was on like Barack Obama's list a few years ago. It was on a bunch of lists. And I did trudge through that book. And I felt good. Like at the end, I was like, okay, I'm really glad I made that journey. So I think maybe my experience with Martyr will be that based on what the two of you say. But please talk. This was also on the Atlantic's editor's best books of the year. So Akbar, is that I think that's his last name.
Yeah.
So again, punching up. This is better than any book I have written or published, which is 0. So what did you, Athena, what happened? What you read, you tried. I know both of you tried.
I was so excited because I was like, oh, just by the sound of it and because of that author, I was like, oh, I'm gonna love this. And I don't know. I didn't feel connected at all. And I kept trying and trying, but I was just like, this feels like work. You know what I mean? So I put it down and then I went back to it and it still felt the same for me. But it was one of those books that, like, this is why we do the podcast, but where I was like, I didn't want to give it away because I felt like, no, I'll connect with this. I just got to keep trying and I will find something here that like resonates with me. But I don't know. It didn't work for me. Like I didn't feel connected to the characters. I didn't feel like invested in the story. I just was like, I don't know. What do you think, Rebecca? Like, you be more articulate than I am about it because I'm
wondering how far
you both got.
What's that?
I'm wondering how far you both got to.
Oh, I didn't get very far. I always try to give it a bit of a chance, but how far did you get, Rebecca?
I'll have to look. Hold on. Because I was listening to it.
Oh, you were listening, right?
Yeah. So, well, I had a credit, so I was like, oh, I'll get that because Colleen just got it, and
stop blaming me.
I just got credit. But I think like Athena, I've tried to go back to it. So I have 3 hours left.
Okay.
I wonder what the normal, like what the whole.
We should, while Rebecca's looking at this, we should point out that Rebecca listens to her books at a speed that is ungodly. And it sounds like the chipmunks are reading the books to you, but somehow she is okay with it at 3 times the speed. I've tried 1.25 and I was miserable. So I don't know how she does this. This is why she's doing math as we sit here. Have you done
I got to chapter 8.
Okay.
And there are 25 chapters. No, 22 chapters.
A good third. You got through a third of it.
Yeah.
We were about the same. That's right.
Yep. So I listened to it at the beginning and I was like, oh, no, I'm not connecting here. I don't know what the reason is. I just was like, I'm struggling to connect to the characters. And so I stopped because I'm like, I have other books I would like to listen to and read. So I left. And then when I listened to all my other books at least 2.5 speed, sometimes 2.85, I was like, okay, I'll come back to it. I finished all those other books that were like, it's really hard. Like when Libby's like, here are the 8 books you've had on hold forever at once. And you're like, ah. So this one was on my phone, so I didn't have to worry about sending it back. Anyway, that's when I've listened to the next like 4 chapters or whatever. And at one point I'm like, okay, I feel like we're getting somewhere. Like I feel like it's going in a direction. And then it went off the rails. And I honestly can't actually tell you it was there something with like blood and like, are you remembering that, Athena? Like there's some like, I was like, what is going on?
No, I felt the same way. I felt
Like menstrual blood, or like blood in your body, or no? All right, the look on your 2 faces is enough to tell me. None of us needs to know anymore about it.
I'm trying to remember. It was like this. For some reason, I think it was in a bathroom. Someone got hurt or something. I really would have, because again, I was just like, and then I just like, there's other things I'd rather be listening to right now. And so so it's still there. It's sitting there. I might go back to it someday. But it hasn't kept my attention. I will have to look at what that blood scene was, but you got to that part too, Athena, right?
I did, yes. That's interesting that we both abandoned it at a similar spot. It's like trying to give it a chunk. I was like, I gotta give a little bit, but then that's enough of that.
Yeah, I also have a whole thing with that. That's like, and this this is a show and not a book, but Breaking Bad, which everybody loved.
I never watched that. I stopped after 1 episode.
Well, I saw like the bathtub with I was just like, I don't need to watch this.
No, I never did either.
And I kind of felt like that with this. Like it was like, I don't really need to listen to all of that.
That's like you in that Lauren Groff book too.
Oh yeah, I stopped that too. Stop killing all the animals. Like no.
Yeah, we love Lauren Groff. That could be but yeah, we'll talk about that at some point. Yeah. I'm thinking about, so like this book that I'm holding up, My Friends by Hisham Martyr, which has been on a lot of lists as well. I'm thinking about this because I don't really connect to any of these characters, but yet I'm still fine reading it. So I think, there is something it is still possible for all of us to read a book that we're not necessarily feeling any kind of I really don't. I don't feel any, but I'm still compelled by the story that is happening in front of me. I don't even know that I particularly care about them, but still the story is good. Like I'm still wanting to go along for the ride. So there's maybe even more, like you said, it was the not connecting to the characters, then what it felt like maybe an unnecessary scene dealing with blood, a book that neither of you has said what it's actually about. So I assume maybe we don't really know. What's it about?
Go, Rebecca.
Okay, well, both of you are nodding, so that's fine.
I feel like I was still trying to figure that out. It felt very much Creation Lake-like, right? Like, well, what's going on here? What's happening?
So maybe there's this inscrutability is really speaking to editors. Maybe this is what the literary landscape thinks we all want.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a really, really good point. That's
yeah. Which is why they're all on the list, right? Yeah, interesting. Okay, so today we talked about a book that we didn't connect with, one that we abandoned. Colleen has yet to read, but may.
I'm going to read it. No, I'm not going to read it. Why would I read a book that the two of you both say is not good?
No.
When I have 1,000 books around me right now.
Logging into the library and canceling hold.
Maybe I'll get it. I'll look at it. I'll get it out of the library because I want the library to buy books like that. So I'll at least keep the circulation numbers up.
Good point. That's awesome. That's really good.
Yeah. So always at the end of the podcast, we share a book that we want to recommend to you. And I find it so fascinating that most of the time when I'm getting to a book, Athena's already read it. It's awesome. I'm like, oh my gosh, I love this so much. She's like, oh, I read it ages ago. You're so behind the times. And this was one of those. And I actually didn't pick it up until Colleen bought it on a trip when she was in London. And when I saw the post of her books that you bought, you should share that with us. But anyway, the post of the books you bought.
I think I just sent it to you. I think I was being guilty.
I thought you posted. Oh, maybe it was just me.
So, can we say what it is?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So it's Cacophony of Bone. Oh, I'm not gonna attempt her last name.
Oh, it's like Kerri, Dochartaigh. It's like a Dochartaigh.
Okay. So, I was in Oxford at the big bookstore, and I think I texted you, and I was like, I do not have room for these books. But I said, but they're cheaper here. And we did the math. We were doing text messages over the math. And you're like, oh, they are cheaper there to buy it. I was like, yeah, so I'm going to buy all these books. I solely bought this book because of the cover, because it was so pretty. I knew nothing about it. I read the back and I was like, yeah.
Just for reference, this is the US cover.
So my cover, if we talk about it, it's got some kind of like beautiful mums, but they're purple. It looks like the American version is orange.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, I'll get this. And I started I haven't read all of it yet, but I'm happy to. And then there was weird. So anyway, this weird thing happened with this book when I sent Rebecca that picture.
Yeah. So once again, Colleen has the book, hasn't totally read it yet. I read the whole thing and I'm like, this is amazing. And Athena's like, I read it. Anyway.
So if I hadn't have sent you that picture, maybe, and made some argument for why I should be buying books next time in England because it was cheaper.
Well, we
would have never been having this conversation to elevate this book.
So I think the thing is, when I first saw it from that you texted me, again, it looked beautiful. Like you said, the cover was beautiful. And then I looked it up and I was like, ooh, I love Irish writers. So I was like already ready to go get it. And then I saw it was about the pandemic. And then I was like, I do not want to read another pandemic book. I just don't want to do it. Yeah. And that's when Athena was like, oh no, it's amazing. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go buy it. And it's written during the pandemic, but it is not about the pandemic.
It's beautiful what I've read. Yeah. It's interesting that the American version has a subtitle. What is it? A circle
of a year.
Okay. The British version doesn't have that. I think we like those little subtitles a little more in the States. But that seems like an apt description of it, right?
Oh yeah.
That is a year. Yeah. She goes into the woods, right? And during COVID.
They have like a house in the middle of nowhere in Ireland.
This is an ode to a year, a place, and a love that changed a life. Like I think I read that sentence and I was like, yep, all right, purchased.
And I think the thing is, so I actually did another podcast in my Illuminated on this one and got into some of the themes and stuff that I really, really resonated with me. And the other thing I noted in that was that there's a portion here about motherhood and grief and then motherhood. And that's always a space for me as someone who hasn't had children. Like sometimes I'm like, but the book was so beautifully written and there was so much there no matter what, that even when the themes, this is talking about connecting, right? Even when the themes go into spaces that I either don't connect with or I don't feel like I really need to go into those spaces, it was still so beautifully written that I wanted to go into those spaces. So to your point of sometimes it's things that you don't connect with. So like later on when she got more into the motherhood stuff, it was still a good read, even though it wasn't something I would normally pick up and resonate with. But for me, and then I'll go to you, Athena, I loved the space and how she talked about like the nature, like the birds throughout the water, like all the scenes through water. But there's a study of light in here as well. Like she starts the book with this kind of study of light and like it coming inside, the light outside. There's just so many beautiful, beautiful scenes throughout, as well as her writing style is amazing. But Athena, since you were the one that read it very first and even encouraged me to actually pick it up again, can you share what you loved about the Cacophony of Bone?
Yeah, I just think it's absolutely beautiful. I love that it's the kind of book where I read it from start to finish, but if you just open it up, you're
I know, I
likely
just did that. Yeah.
yeah, you're likely to fall on something beautiful.
Fifth
you know?
day, the dog is just so full of joy. It is contagious. And that's all she wrote on the fifth day. I was like, oh,
Yes. I know, isn't that beautiful? I love like also nature. That kind of writing is one of my favorite things. Right now, I'm also reading "Going to Sea," and it's a tribute by nature writers to Barry Lopez and his work, which is really beautiful. And so that I also just the side note generally love that kind of writing too. But Pilgrim at Tinker Creek is like my favorite book of all time by Annie Dillard. Just a little plug there, Annie Dillard plug. So
wait,
anyway,
which Annie Dillard?
Pilgrim at Tinker Creek.
Oh, I love Holy the Firm. I was like,
Oh, I know.
yeah.
Holy the
Anyway,
Firm.
so we could talk about Annie Dillard
Oh my
anytime.
God, I could have a whole Annie Dillard. Like, come on.
Bellingham.
Ugh.
She's in Bellingham?
From
Well, she wrote a lot of out on one of the islands, and she actually donated a sculpture to WWU. So she has a neat connection to Western Washington University. Sorry.
Well, we have AJ Brown's book club.
Yes.
Here.
Yes, you do. You do.
well, the living is about like the start of Bellingham.
Right.
Huh. I didn't know that.
Isn't that cool? Sorry. So that's
You
all.
learn something new every time you spend time with us.
This is right up my alley, this book. So anyway, it was just beautiful. It was beautifully done. I loved how I don't know. It's just, to me, it was like kind of an escape and peaceful to be in that place with her. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just kind of felt at home in her writing too. It felt easy and beautiful. I loved it.
Yeah, so it's kind of set up like a journal in some way, right? We get the daily like reflections. We have a beginning part that kind of gives us an overview or that space. So it's really meditative as well. And there's just like, I don't know, it kind of even just felt like really deep breaths, right? Like you just feel like, like the writing and everything. Like it's just gorgeous. Highly recommend it.
Yep, beautiful book.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to dig into it more. Maybe that'll be my solace book that I slowly read. It's always sitting here. I don't know why I haven't. Yeah. It's just so pretty though.
I think it would be a good one, right? In the times we're in right now, and just thinking about, change and grief, and it might be a good one to pick up right now.
We'll see. You never know what's going to start a chain reaction as readers. Because if I had never sent Rebecca that picture to justify purchasing more books and shoving them into my carry-on, we would have never been talking about this or have read this book, and we would have never found out Athena read it.
Yeah.
Exactly. So thank you everyone for joining us today with the book podcasters on this There's Nothing Wrong with You book podcast. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe and share out on social. It helps podcasts like ours. Thank you and have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye. Bye, friends.